Welcome back to my channel. I'm Spellsinger and I'm going to carry on my review of the Way of the Tiger series of game books. Before I go into it, I just want to say a thanks to some subscribers. I've just picked a few at random, just 5, just to say thank you for subscribing, and it's good to know that there is still some interest. So thank you to Javoiro, Mike Walker, 1 Leonardo 4, Monkey Smiles 4, and Emma Ainan. Thank you very much, really appreciate it. Right, so this review is going to bring you the usual, so I'll look at the title and book number for this entry. I shall read the blurb, go through the plot, and then talk a bit about the game mechanics and the adventure sheet. I shall run the artwork through this video, and then talk a little bit about my likes and dislikes, some fun facts, and then finish on a summary and score for this book. So this is book 1 of Way of the Tiger. This is Avenger. So this follows on from my past review, which was the Ninja, which was the prequel. And this one is written by Mark Smith and Jamie Thompson. They did a couple of entries for the Fighting Fantasy series, both really good. And this was also in 1985, so it's still in that sort of mid-80s era of this game book craze that we're in the middle of. The artwork was by Bob Harvey, so he's back on board after doing the honours for these two authors during the 2 Fighting Fantasy books as well. They seem to have a good relationship. The cover, this is the one I kind of grew up with, but there was one before it which looks a bit like this, and there was also a one after the one from the 80s which looks a bit like this. So this is the more modern one. This is the one you will get if you buy the box set that is available now, which was reprinted not too long ago. But everybody loves the one they grew up with, right? So I think I'll keep that one up. So yeah, let's have a read of the blurb for this one. I've got my copy here. It's pretty battered. It is quite old. So yeah, to be expected. So here we go. This is Avenger. You are a ninja warrior, worshipper of Kwon, supreme master of unarmed combat. Trained in the Way of the Tiger, you are now an outstanding master of the martial arts, ready to use your deadly skills to overturn evil and to avenge the death of your foster father Nagishi. Nagishi's assassin has stolen the scrolls of Kettsuin, guardian of the secret word of power, which could imprison Kwon in the Inferno forever, unleashing the forces of evil throughout the world of Orb. Your quest is to find the assassin before he reaches the pillars of change. So there you go. Let's go into the plot on this book. So Avenger is set in the world of Orb, like we touched on in the prequel. It has many different cultures, and it's very well defined. Lots of worshipped gods and such. And there's a map actually on the inside cover, so I'll put that up here. A really nice color map, which gives you an idea of scale when you're wandering around this world. You get a good background to the order that you're involved in, the order of monks. You get given details of like the customs, the characters of the places you visit, as well as the gods and these persons that they worship. So it's a lot of detail, there's a lot of exposition, but not so much so that you lose track of the story. You also have your own backstory. So you play this character, Avenger. You're washed up on the island of Tranquil Dreams as a baby, and sporting a strange kind of birthmark in the look of a crown, I think it is. And you don't know who your real father is, but you're taken in by these worshippers of the god Kwon, these monks, and you're taught the way of the ninja, basically. You have a foster father, who's that Nagishi fella, and he teaches you a lot about the Way of the Tiger and being a ninja. So he's then killed by this bloke called Yemen, who shows up in disguise. He's actually a worshipper of the evil god Vile, which is like the evil twin brother, if you like, of Kwon, so the opposite. This guy Yemen, he steals the scrolls of Kettsuin from the monks, and he plans to use them to trap Kwon in like eternal fire. And your mission is to stop Yemen, avenge your father and save your god, but also return those scrolls back to the the Isle of Tranquil Dreams. The other characters in this book are just as detailed as yourself. Despite the thoroughness of your training, your allies and opponents all have their own special skills. This makes the combat very unique, really unique challenges. For example, there's this guy called Glavis who shows up throughout the series of books, but he's introduced in this one. He's an ally and he's like an expert swordsman and ranger. And then you've got the villain, Honoric, who's like this mighty warrior with this magic suppressing sword. And then you've got Mance Death Mage, who can kill with a word. And of course, the final boss, Yaman, who's this unparalleled martial artist. They all have really strong characters, really detailed backgrounds. And all the opponents have a sense of individuality, such as this two-headed, heavy kind of giant that shows up that you have to battle. You basically, you can only use kicks and punches on him. You can't throw him because he's so huge, and that's all given away in the picture if you pick up on it. And then you've got Olvar, who's this barbarian, and he can fire these lightning bolts. And there's this ogre with a spiked hammer. And so yeah, there's lots of clues given away in the art. You need to come up with like a new strategy to defeat all of these characters based on what you're told in the story and what you can pick up in the images. You get the sense that Orb is a living, breathing world and not just a series of set pieces that are just there because you are. You occasionally end up with these kind of random situations like witnessing a soldier get decapitated by a priest or getting captured and forced to fight in this battle arena. So there's lots of little random sub-quests that you can get involved in, which is quite nice. You also have this strong purpose and backstory going way above the old enter the dungeon and steal the treasure type thing that Fighter Fantasy was quite into. Nothing wrong with that, I love fighting fantasy, but it did feel that as you read these Way of the Tiger stories, that the story was a little bit more involved, shall we say. Okay, just moving on to the game mechanics and adventure sheet. I think I brushed over these a bit quick in that last review, so I'll just touch on them again and talk a little bit about the maneuvers you could pull, these ninja moves that you can do as well. So the combat's made up of kicks, punches, and throws, and they're quite, as you would imagine, the kicks are harder to perform, but they deal more damage. And then also, if you can manage to throw someone, you leave them quite vulnerable to following attack. The combat works with your enemy having a defense number, so there's a little image here. You can see the defense number and the name of the person you're fighting, a little bit about them, and also the dice that they will roll to cause damage. And so I mentioned the moves. So if you look at this image here, you can see all the moves, all the different ninja moves that you can do. So basically, you've got 3 different types of punches, 3 different types of kicks, and then you've got the throws as well. And each one has its own merits, and depending on what kind of creature or encounter you are fighting, one will work better than another. I'll give an example of that a bit later on, but yeah, there's your 3 attacks for punching, 3 attacks for kicks, and the 3 different types of throws. The route to victory is quite wide in this story. There's still one true path if you can find it that has minimum danger. Many of the choices can also be helped by clues that you can pick up from the text and the images, like I say. And the consequences of your choices are quite logical, such as what happens if you try and throw someone who's heavily built. Like, for example, there's this guy at the start, Gorabai. He's Gorabay, I think is pronounced. He's basically an initiate of the inner circle as well, and he is a worshipper of Kwon, but he's the first guy you have to overcome to kind of prove your worth. So when you see him, you realize he's a big fella, and therefore throwing would be exceptionally difficult. I'll pick that up later on and maybe read the reference so you get an idea of what it says and what it shows. The skills, I don't think I touched on these in the last one either. The skills that you get to choose in this book, you get a list of skills, and then basically you can choose 3, but all the ninjas get this shuriken jitsu, which is obviously the ability to throw a shuriken at your enemy. But you get all kinds of other ones. You've got arrow cutting, acrobatics, immunity to poison, feigning death, escapology, poison needles, locks and traps, and climbing. So you get to choose from one of those as well, and they will be used throughout the story. Some of them are more popular at the beginning of this book, but they all get to be used throughout the whole series. I suppose you could almost say, like in this book, especially the poison darts, the climbing, and the acrobatics are quite commonly used, so you'll get a chance to use those a lot in this one, maybe not so much in the other ones. But in this book, escapology and feigning death are barely used, so it's good to have a quick read through them to sort of see what you think might be good, but of course you're not going to know until you've at least attempted this book a couple of times. The random elements of the book are well balanced, actually, and there are no really unfair combats or unavoidable deaths. The final battle against Yemen is really clever, actually. Instead of simply rolling dice, you have to choose a sequence of moves to perform, and you either will or won't inflict damage. The same move won't work twice either. He gets wise to what you try and do. There's a guy that you meet halfway through this book, Tagawa, and he teaches you this kick, Kwon's flail. And if you use it on him, he doesn't expect it, and you can deal a lot of damage. But if you try and do it again, he gets wise to it, and he punishes you quite badly. Avenger has a great level of gameplay, especially with the option-based combats, like I just mentioned. And the diagrams at the beginning, the exposition during the combat, all really good. The rules are quite simple, they're fitting, and they're quite versatile. They're more complicated than most game books, but not too complicated. You have these modifiers for your punches, kicks, and throws, so they can go up and down throughout the story, throughout the adventure, depending on what you pick up or what injuries you take. But you also have fate, which is like this version of testing your luck from the Fighting Fantasy series. You have this inner force, which allows you to double your damage that you deal, should you wish to use it. And you also have your endurance to keep track of as well, which is like your stamina from the Fighting Fantasy books. Combat is quite innovative. It provides you with lots of options, unlike the purely luck-based combat of Fighting Fantasy and Lone Wolf. You get to choose your punch and kicks and throws, like we've looked at. And each move has a different advantage or disadvantage depending on who you're fighting. You can also block an opponent's attack, but of course that leaves you susceptible to the next attack from them. So your offensive power will be less. And so you really need to experiment with how each move works against which opponent you're fighting. So this is the adventure sheet. And it's quite a bit different from what we're used to being seeing, but it's exactly the same as the one from the prequel, Ninja, and it will be the same throughout the whole series of books. So it's quite good in that you can. It's a good way of keeping record of obviously all your modifiers, which are the things that will change quite a lot. There's a place there to mark off your shurikens as you use them, and keep a note of any items or equipment. So it's your standard adventure sheet that you would expect to get, and like I say, it doesn't change throughout the whole series. Okay, let's have a look at the artwork for this book. This is Bob Harvey's work. Again, very dynamic, very dynamic illustrations, really make a hard impact. Most of the illustrations are of some of the best moments in the book, such as that decapitation that I mentioned, or the ogre that boards your ship when you're trying to leave the island of Tranquil Dreams. There's a crazed barbarian that's bringing his huge sword down upon you, and they're all really detailed, really nice pictures. I'll put a few up here so you can see them. The cover shows you dressed in your black ninja costume at the Temple of Kwon, ready for action, basically. And I've got a favourite here, actually. This picture here is of Tagawa, and he's the fella that teaches that Kwon's flail kick. And always liked this picture as a kid. You really see the impact of that move on that creature. But yeah, likes and dislikes. So for this one, Jamie Thompson and Mark Smith, they've really created a highly detailed and immersive world with the Way of the Tiger, and they kind of place your character in there. Unlike some of the Gamebook protagonists. There's a big backstory. Previously, they were just touched on, in some of the earlier books, but on this one, they really have a great story, and you've got this huge epic quest that also has many human touches as well. The book has many virtues. It's not just the fact that it contains ninjas and was the first in a series of 6 books, like I say, but there was an additional one that came out recently, book 7, to finish off the whole series, which was called Redeemer. Smith and Thompson have a good writing style, which comes to life when they're describing a battle scene or a landscape. And you also get the feeling that they're really into this world of Orb that they've created. They describe their people, their gods, the environment, really high detail and a really good, strong prose. Okay, fun facts for this book. The way that both authors split the writing up for this series, one would write the even references, whereas the other one would write the odd references. So if you think Jackson and Livingstone of the Fighting Fantasy series, when they wrote their book together, the Warlock of Firetop Mountain, they basically split it in half. But I guess it worked for Jamie Thompson and Mark Smith, just writing alternate references. It's strange actually, because you'd think you'd have to know what comes before it, even if you didn't write it, in order to make sense of your reference, but I guess it worked. There's also, this series also received a Spectrum and Commodore computer game released by Gremlin Graphics, I think it was. Someone in the previous video on the prequel mentioned this, so I thought I'd better at least state it. I never played it as a kid, but apparently they are out there. I'm sure they'll be on YouTube playthroughs or whatever, so if you're interested, that might be something to check out. Okay, so summary and score for this book. Avenger is a grand feast with lots to get your teeth into, from the backstory, the scenarios, the interactions with other characters, and the experience of the world of Orb. The book is challenging, but not impossible, and you get a real sense of achievement as well when you kill 3 of Orb's most powerful villains and get a personal visit from your god to congratulate you as well. That's nice. It's a real must for all Gamebook fans. Avenger puts you in a rich fantasy world with an oriental theme. The writing is excellent for a Gamebook, and the depth and flavour of Orb is simply fantastic. Orb is a separate world, but you have elements from our world planted within, like the ninjas and the oriental theme, and it's almost like reading a novel at times, albeit one filled with an array of random illustrations of gory deaths, should you make the wrong choice. This book has quite a complex storyline. It has a good mix of politics, combat, storytelling, and the 1980s was a popular time for ninja movies anyway. They were everywhere. You had the whole successful Fighting Fantasy series coupled with that. Where the Tiger brought something new with it. The theme, the story arc, the ninja culture in a fantasy world, all very new and all quite desirable. The game system is quite tactical, which is also quite new. Previous game books had quite a simple mechanic for combat or rolling for skill or testing your luck. And use this as like a template, but Way of the Tiger gave the reader sort of more meaningful tactical options, involved describing each combat in quite a lot of detail, giving clues to sort of help you with your strategy, like I mentioned earlier, before you start your combat. And then it's much more involved with all the ninja movements to choose from. That really gives you a kind of intensity to this and an immersive quality unknown in sort of previous other game books. So, for example, let me read you that first reference. So basically, you imagine this is the first combat you get into. So this is like literally reference 1, and you get a picture of Gora Bay, which I will put up here so you can see it as well. But it basically describes this. You walk into the temple and bow to the Grand Master of the Dawn, a man who looks younger than his 50 years, slim and taut with piercing dark eyes. Beside you, Gora Bay also bows, his face a mask showing no emotion. He is clad only in a loincloth, and his rippling muscles gleam with an oil that could make it difficult to keep a grip of him. So based on that and the image, they're basically telling you, you can't throw him. And if you do try and throw him, you get punished quite badly. So there's lots of examples of that. I really liked that about this book. Lots of little examples of just using common sense, actively reading the story to pick up clues, and then taking in the details of these pictures to kind of make your overall choice, whatever it is you want to do. So yeah, with good gameplay, really high attention to detail, and with the right decisions being rewarded so heavily, I would give this book a 8 out of 10. It's an absolute corker. Right, I think that wraps up this review. I hope you liked it. If you did, give it a thumbs up, maybe share it if you think there's someone else who might like this. And in the next review, I might actually, I'll do the next book, which is obviously book 2, Assassin, which follows on exactly from where this one leaves off. I mean, they all do to a certain extent, but this book 2 literally carries on from the next reference, whereas the rest of them have an amount of time that's passed by. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I will catch you in the next one.